Today, we are going to cover Chapter 1. We will cover this chapter across two videos. The main content includes the basic definition of the four pillars, what Yin and Yang are, and how Yin and Yang further differentiate into the five phases, the definitions and the characteristics of the five phases, the basic definitions of the heavenly stems and earthly branches, the generation restriction relationships of the five phases. We will go beyond basic generation and restriction to explore complex dynamics like reverse of generation to restriction, excessive drain as restriction, and inversion of restriction, or quantitative foundations of generation restriction dynamics in the five phases. And in the next video, we will cover the concept of the 10 gods, GRR within the 10 god system, using Jia Wood as an example, the introduction and classification of the 10 gods, the fundamental logic of the 10 gods GRR centered on the day master, and finally, the shift of the Tai Chi point. Now, Tai Chi point here isn't about Chinese Kung Fu. It's our frame of reference. We will shift this reference point from day master to the officer, wealth, output, or sales stars, treating each as a new center of analysis to further elucidate the logic of generation and restriction. That covers all the basic concepts for Chapter 1. The following Chapter 2, 3, and 4 will bridge these metaphysical basics with social structures and social phenomena to deepen our analysis. In other words, for this video series on Ba Zi and social structures, you won't need any more technical knowledge of Ba Zi than what we cover here. Chapter 1 provides everything you need. Alright, let's step into today's main topic. First question, what exactly is Ba Zi? Ba Zi is a core methodology within traditional Chinese metaphysics. It is a predictive system grounded in astronomical and calendrical principles. Now, what do we mean by astronomical calendrical principles? To understand the calendar used in Ba Zi, we have to distinguish between two common concepts, the lunar calendar and the solar calendar. The lunar calendar follows the moon, determining months based on waxing and waning of lunar phases. For example, the 1st and 15th day of lunar months correspond to the new moon and the full moon. The solar calendar follows the sun, dividing time according to the Earth's position in its orbit around the sun. Its most important makers are the 24 solar terms. The traditional Chinese calendar used in daily life is actually a lunisolar calendar, combining both lunar and solar system. However, Ba Zi utilizes a system known as the sexagenary calendar, or more descriptively, the stem branch calendar. This system belongs to a solar calendar framework based on chalk year and follows sun's motion entirely. It uses the heavenly stem and the earthly branches to record the year, month, day, and hour of one's birth. Therefore, there is one crucial point you must remember. In Ba Zi, both the year and the months are determined by solar terms, not by the lunar calendar. So here's golden rule to remember. In Chinese metaphysics, the beginning of a year is marked by the start of spring, not by the Lunar New Year, and certainly not on January 1st. Let's look at 2026 as a concrete example. The Lunar New Year is on February 17th, but the start of spring actually occurs at 4:01:51 a.m. on February 1st. So where is the boundary between the year of the snake and the year of the horse? In Ba Zi, anyone born before 4:01:51 a.m. on February 1st is still a snake. Only those born after that specific moment are considered a horse. The same goes for months. A month in Ba Zi doesn't start on the first day of the lunar month. It starts at specific solar terminals like start of spring, awakening of insects, all clear and bright. These solar terms are what actually define month transitions in Ba Zi. Understand? Simply put, if you look at the moment the 2026 start of spring begins, the Ba Zi is 丙午, 庚寅, 己酉, 丙寅. These are the four pillars: year pillar, month pillar, date pillar, and hour pillar. Since each pillar has one heavenly stem and one earthly branch, you have a total of 8 characters. In Chinese, the pronunciation of the 8 characters is Ba Zi, so the literal meaning is quite simple. 4 pillars, 8 characters. Now, to understand what the heavenly stems and earthly branches actually are and where they come from, we must start from the most fundamental concepts. What is Yin and Yang? The book of change states, in the Yi there is Tai Chi, which gives rise to the two forms, and two forms give rise to the four emblems. The four emblems give rise to 8 trigrams. In this context, Tai Chi refers to primordial chaotic states before heaven and earth were differentiated. When Tai Chi begins to move, it differentiates into the two forms, namely Yin and Yang Qi. This differentiation represents the two most fundamental forces in the universe. Yang governs movement and Yin governs stillness. Now, this sounds a bit abstract, so let's interpret it in a more accessible way. Imagine God as a programmer creating the world as a masterpiece of software. In the beginning, everything is in a chaotic state, meaning the program is undefined and no rules exist yet. For programmer, what is the very first step? It's 0 and 1. That is yin and yang. Similarly, from a philosophical perspective, Lao Tzu said, when everyone knows beauty is beauty, ugliness already exists. What does this mean? It means we only know what beauty is because we have ugliness to compare it with. We only understand good because evil exists. This is the essence of yin and yang. They always appear in pairs. The moment you distinguish right from wrong or good from bad, you have differentiated yin and yang. It's no longer a state of chaos. So, what is chaos? Chaos is a state with no good, no evil, no distinctions of any kind. That is true chaos. But in our real world, since yin and yang have already been differentiated, nothing is absolute. There's no such thing as an absolutely good person or an absolutely evil person. In everyone's factory setting, good and evil are mixed in different proportions. Some people might be a 50-50 split, others might be 90-10, but 100 pure states simply does not exist. What does the two forms give rise to the four emblems mean? It means that yin and yang differentiate further into 4 stages: greater yang, lesser yang, lesser yin, and greater yin. These represent the different phases of the yin yang development. Think of the 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. If we distinguish yin and yang by movement and stillness, the spring and summer, when life flourishes, belong to yang. Autumn and winter, when life withdraws, belong to yin. But here is the question. If both spring and summer are yang, how do we further distinguish movement and stillness between them? This is a relative distinction. First, let's look at spring. Life's waking up, vitality just begin to bud. All the things are growing, the movement is gentle and gradual. Imagine a flow of chi that doesn't just shoot straight up, but instead spreads outward in all directions. Like branches stretching out from a tree, this outward diffusing mode of movement has the qualities of growth and expansion. This is what we call lesser yang because it represents the initial movement of qi. It corresponds to the wood phase. phase. Then comes summer. Compared to spring, everything is now in full bloom. Yang qi has reached its peak. The qi is no longer just spreading gently outwards, it's moving fiercely upward like blazing fire. It's intense and ascending. This is greater yang, movement with movement. It's extreme state of active qi, so it corresponds to the fire phase. By the same logic, autumn and winter both belong to yin. How do we distinguish them? In autumn, things begin to contract, yang qi start to recede, the energy moves towards stillness, yet there is still the lingering vitality of ripening fruit. At this stage, the qi transitions from the outward and upward movement of summer into an inward contraction, much like metal cooling and solidifying, and is characterized by descent and restriction. This state is referred to as lesser yin. As the initial phase of in stillness, its corresponding phase is metal. Finally, look at winter. Compared to autumn, everything is in full hibernation. Vitality is stored deep inside. The qi now moves completely downward, exhibiting coldness and containment. Like water flowing to lower places, it symbolizes moistening and nourishment. This is greater yin, stillness within stillness, the extreme of tranquil qi. So the corresponding phase is water. So now we have clarified where the four emblems as well as metal, wood, water, and fire come from. But when these four types of qi, lesser yang, lesser yin, and greater yin, interact, collide, and merge, they create a fifth phase, earth. What is earth? It's the product of the interaction between yin and yang. It is the balancing force of the five phases. Unlike fire that flames up or water that flows down, Earth provides transformation, support, and receptivity. Think of Earth as a massive platform that civilizes and harmonizes everything, encompassing all life. So it should be clear by now when the ancients spoke of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, they were not referring to five physical substances. Fundamentally, they represent five modes of energy movement in the universe. Now that we understand the origin and definition of the five phases, we can move on to the heavenly stems and earthly branches. Let's start with the heavenly stems. Think of them as a result of the second round of yin-yang differentiation applied to the five phases. We have five phases, and if we split each into yin version and the yang version, well, 5 times 2 equals 10. Simply enough, right? That's why there are exactly 10 heavenly stems. 甲、乙、丙、丁、戊、己、庚、辛、壬, and 癸. Each belongs to one of the five phases, but each carries either a yin or a yang nature. Let's take wood as our example to see how this internal yin-yang differentiation works. In this system, wood manifests in two forms. Jia is the yang wood and Yi is the yin wood. As we discussed earlier, the essence of yin and yang lies in the contrast between movement and stillness. Jia, being yang wood, represents movement. It's the active, directive force of wood, symbolizing outward vitality and vigorous growth. Yi, on the other hand, is yin wood. It represents stillness. It's the internal quality of wood, symbolizing foundational roots and stability. But the definition doesn't stop there. If we stick with our God as program perspective, we see that the logic of this source code can be subdivided infinitely. Let's take it a step further. We can apply yin-yang differentiation within the heavenly stems themselves. In Jia wood, we have Jia of Jia, which symbolizes the dispersal of vitality, the expansive growth of a tree's crown reaching towards the sky. This is movement within movement. Then we have Yi of Jia, which represents the condensation of that same vitality, the solid trunk accumulating the inner strings needed to support that growth. This is movement within stillness. The same applies to Yi wood. Jia of Yi represents the outward growth of branches and leaves, while Yi of Yi refers to the intricate internal textures and details of foliage itself. In simple terms, Jia wood is usually represented in nature as a towering tree, while Yi wood is seen as twining wires of flowers. What does this logic illustrate? It shows that work evolves from chaos, differentiates into yin and yang. Yin and Yang differentiate into the four emblems and five phases. The five phases further differentiate into the 10 heavenly stems, and the 10 heavenly stems continue to differentiate endlessly. This is a recursive process. Through this endless subdivision, everything in our universe is formed. In essence, our world operates like a massive virtual reality. Once you grasp this logic of differentiation, you can apply the same analogy to the other four phases. To make it easier for you to master, here's a summary of the core characteristics and nature imagery of the 10 heavenly stems. Jia, yang wood, dynamic, is the external force of wood, symbolizing vital energy and vigorous growth. Think of towering trees. Yi, yin wood, static, is the internal quality of wood, symbolizing foundational roots and stability. Think of twining vines or flowers. Bing, yang fire, dynamic, the external force of fire, symbolizing the fire of the sun, likened to blazing flames. Ding, yin fire, static, the internal quality of fire, symbolizing warmth and subtlety, likened to flickering candlelight. Wu, yang earth, dynamic, the external force of earth, symbolizing firmness and support, likened to majestic mountains. Ji, in earth, static, the internal quality of earth, symbolizing inclusiveness and nourishment, likened to fertile fields. Geng, yang metal, dynamic, the external force of metal, symbolizing sharpness and decisiveness, likened to a sharp sword. Xin, in metal, static, the internal quality of metal, symbolizing refinement and elegance, likened to delicate jewelry. Ren, yang water, dynamic, the external force of water, symbolizing flow and vitality, likened to rushing rivers. Gui, in water, static, the internal quality of water, symbolizing moisture and tranquility, likened to gentle dew. Now that we have covered the heavenly stems, let's move on to the earthly branches. There are 12 of them: Zi, Chou, Yin, Mao, Chen, Si, Wu, Wei, Shen, You, Xu, and Hai. Two questions arise here. First, how are the five phases assigned to these 12 earthly branches? Second, why are there 10 heavenly stems but 12 earthly branches? Let's tackle the first question. The earthly branches correspond to the 12 months of the year. In nature, the transition between these months, and more importantly, between the five phases, is not abrupt. For example, you don't just jump straight from wood phase of spring into the fire phase of summer. There need to be a buffer. The buffer is Earth. So the 12 Earth branches are essentially built on the yin-yang differentiation of the five phases, but with four Earth months added in. These Earth months serve as critical transitional phases between the four seasons, ensuring a smooth flow of energy. Now, for the second question, why 12 earthly branches? As the name implies, heavenly steps represent the chi of heaven, a pure logical differentiation of energy. But earthly branches relate specifically to the ground beneath our feet, our planet, Earth. The number 12 isn't arbitrary. It comes from fundamental astronomical cycles. From our perspective here on Earth, the Moon orbits us roughly every 29.5 days, while we orbit the Sun in about 365 days. If you divide 365 by 29.5, you get approximately 12.3. In practical observation, this means there are about 12 complete lunar cycles with a single solar year. To create a stable way to divide the rhythm of time, the ancients used the number 12 as their foundation. This led to the system we have today: the 12 earthly branches, the 12 double hours, and the 12 palaces. You'll notice that it's not just Ba Zi, from Western astrology to Vedic system. Almost every method used to deduce human destiny lands on this 12 palace structure. In fact, the Bazi system originally had a structure of 12 palaces, though it's rarely used today. Simply put, we use 12 because we are Earthlings. If you believed on Mars or Venus, where the orbital and rotational periods are completely different, the number of earthly branches in those worlds would naturally change too. It's all about the physical environment we are living in. The earthly branches correspond to 12 months of the year and are also associated with 12 Chinese zodiac animals. Like the heavenly stems, the earthly branches also possess their own yin yang and five faces attributes. When you combine these two systems, you get complete sexagenary cycle, 60-unit repeating system. This framework is used not only to mark time, but also to analyze the GRR within person's destiny. At this point, you should have a clear picture of what those 8 characters in a Bazi chart actually are and where they come from. Now, since the main goal of this series is to explore the 10 gods and their relationship to social structures, we won't get bogged down in the technical derivation of the sexagenary cycle or the specific details of each earthly branch. Those are directly relevant to the analysis we're about to do, so with the basics out of the way, let's move on to the real core of the system. The final topic for today's video is about the generation restriction relationship of the five phases. There are a total of 5 types, which we will explain in order. First, generation. The generation relationship among the five phases refers to the nourishing and facilitating interactions among five phases, forming a cyclical pattern of creation. Wood generates fire. Wood acts as fuel for the flame. Fire generates earth. Fire burns and leaves behind ash, which enriches the soil. Earth generates metal. Metals and the minerals are formed within the earth. Metal generates water. You see this in how dew condenses on metal surfaces, or how water sources often found near mineral deposits. Water generates wood. Water nourishes all life, allowing plants and trees to grow. Second, restriction. The restriction relationship among five phases refers to control and suppression exerted by one phase over another. The restriction relationships are as follows. Wood restricts earth. Tree roots penetrate and break up the soil. Earth restricts water. Soil can dam up a flow and absorb the water. Water restricts fire. Water extinguishes flames. Fire restricts metal. Fire melts metal. Metal restricts wood. Metal tools are used to cut and shape wood. These concepts of generation and restriction are very easy to understand, and there are corresponding phenomena in nature. So, I will stick to the basics here and move quickly through them without over explaining. Third, reversal of generation to restriction. In normal generation relationship, one phase nourishes another. However, if the nourishing side becomes overwhelmingly powerful, that generative force actually turns into restrictive one. We call this reversal of generation into restriction. Let's look at how this happens in nature. Regarding the relationship between metal and earth, earth can generate metal, but if there's too much earth, it completely buries the metal, making it impossible to discover a mine. This is called excessive earth buries metal. Furthermore, fire creates earth, but excessive fire scorches the earth, turning fertile soil into dry, useless dust that just blows away in the wind. This is excessive fire scorches earth. Wood generates fire. For example, think of primitive wood burning stove. If you cram it too full of wood, the space for air becomes small. Instead of generating fire easily, it might extinguish the fire. This is called excessive wood suffocates fire. Water generates wood, but if water is excessive, for instance, during a flood, many plants will float without roots, stop growing, or even die. This is called excessive water drifts wood. Metal generates water, but if metal is excessive, the water will become turbid. It's like too many metallic minerals dissolving into the water, causing the water quality to become muddy and dirty, losing its purity. This is called excessive metal muddies water. Fourth, excessive drain adds restriction. Similarly, overexertion of one phase in nurturing another may result in imbalance and ultimately lead to suppression. This situation is known as excessive drain as restriction. First, water generates wood, But excessive wood depletes water. Water nourishes trees to grow, but if there are too many trees, too large, like forests frantically absorbing groundwater, it will cause water sources to dry up and the rivers to shrink. Next, wood generates fire. But if fire reaches out of control, it will rapidly consume every bit of timber, turning a whole forest into ash in an instant. The fuel is gone and the wood is destroyed. This is excessive fire consumes wood. Fire generates earth. But if you dump too thick a layer of soil onto a fire, it cuts off the oxygen, suffocating the flames until they die out. This is excessive earth mother's fire. Earth generates metal. The earth nurtures minerals, but if you aggressively mine those metal veins, we hollow out the soil and destroy the land's fertility, leading to barren, weakened, or even collapsing ground. This is excessive metal hollows earth. Finally, metal generates water, but if flood surges and completely submerges metal objects, the metal either disappears into the deep or rusts away, rendered completely useless. This is excessive water seeks metal. Fifth, inversion of restriction. The phenomenon of inversion of restriction refers to the situations where the standard restriction relationship between two phases is reversed if the underdog is significantly stronger. We know metal tools cut wood, but it all depends on the relative strengths. If you take a tiny pocket knife to a towering redwood tree, you're just scratching the edge. The knife will snap a bit rude. This is called excessive wood chips metal. Interesting fact, in the five phases logic, spring is when wood energy is at its peak, inversely restricting metal. Actually shows up in long-term seasonal statistics. Gold prices often show volatility or seasonal corrections during this period. Normally, wood restricts earth as tree roots can penetrate the soil layer, but if the earth is too thick and hard, such as rock layer or permafrost, the roots cannot penetrate it and can only grow in shallow layers. On bare mountain peaks, you will often see young saplings that wither because their roots cannot anchor deeply in the thin soil. This is excessive earth snaps wood. Normally, earth restricts water as dam blocks the flow. But if a massive flash flood hit a weak levee, the water won't be stopped. It will sweep the entire structure away. In nature, great floods don't just bypass the soil, they devour it. This is excessive water dissipates earth. We use water to put out fires, but if you throw a single cup of water onto a raging forest fire, that water doesn't stand a chance. It gets instantly vaporized by the heat, and the fire rages on. This is excessive fire vaporizes water. Finally, fire melts metal. But if the metal is a massive cold slab and the fire is just a tiny flame, the metal will suck the heat out of the fire so fast that the flame just dies. If you drop a heavy block of cold iron onto a small campfire, the fire goes out instantly. This is excessive metal quenches fire. After explaining these five generation restriction relationships, you might start wondering, water can put out fire, but if fire is large enough, it can also boil the water dry. So where exactly is the boundary? How much water is not enough to extinguish fire? And similarly, how much earth is too much before it completely buries metal? In traditional metaphysics, this question usually depend entirely on the experience or intuition of the fortune teller. However, in this series, to analyze macro social structures, we cannot rely on gut feelings. We must introduce the concept of quantification. Think of it like physics. If you only have qualitative descriptions without quantitative analysis, you cannot build a model. So to make this system usable for analyzing complex social phenomena, I introduced a quantitative framework based on system dynamics. Just to be clear, this kind of quantification is not meant to reproduce real physical processes. It's structure abstraction designed to describe relative forces and system behavior. The detailed mathematical derivations are available on my GitHub, but for this video, all you need to do is understand and remember two core pieces of logic. The first piece of logic we need to understand is something called the intrinsic bias coefficient alpha. In this model, we set alpha to 2.0. So what does this actually mean? Let me use a familiar example. In games like Pokemon, elemental counters come with built-in damage bonuses. Water type attacks against fire type do double damage by default. That's what we usually call attribute advantage. The five phases system works in similar way. Relationships of generation and restriction are not perfectly symmetric exchanges. They contain a built-in structure bias. In other words, the restricting side, for example, water, naturally has about 200% suppressive efficiency relative to the restricted side, such as fire. So why choose 2.0 specifically? Because in fields like material mechanics and control theory, to produce irreversible change of stable suppression, the applied influence usually needs to exceed twice the baseline level. You can think of this as a system's default or its factory setting. The second core piece of logic is about the system's red line, the collapse point at 4.0. Once we have the intrinsic bias coefficient of 2.0, we can readily derive very different system states from it. Let's first look at the case of restriction, which follows an antagonistic model. Since water has intrinsic structure advantage over fire in restriction relationships, the question becomes, how strong does fire need to be to reverse that relationship? The answer is simple. Fire has to be more than 4 times stronger than water. If fire is only 1 to 2 times stronger, water's intrinsic attribute advantage is still enough to suppress it reliably. If fire grows to around 2 to 3 times the strength of water, the system enters a high dissipation stalemate. Both sides are burning resources, but neither can decisively overpower the other. The system becomes highly inefficient. But once fire exceeds 4 times the strength of water, sheer quantitative dominance completely overwhelms its original attribute disadvantage. At that point, the situation flips instantly. Water can no longer extinguish fire and is instead rapidly vaporized. This is what we call inverse of restriction. Now let's look at generation, which follows that we call a flux model. Generation is not confrontation. It is about energy transfer and conversion. When wood generates fire, wood acts as the fuel, and fire acts as converter. Every energy transfer system operates within a tolerance window. Within that window, input and capacity are matched, and the system runs efficiently and stably. According to our model, the healthiest conversion happens when the ratio between the source and the receiver stays between zero point 0.5 and 2.0. In this range, the fuel is sufficient. The flame can handle the input and energy flows smoothly. But here too, there is a red flag at 4.0. If the amount of fuel exceeds the flame's carrying capacity by more than 4 times, the system breaks down in an unexpected way. Too much fuel blocks airflow and the flame is suffocated. This is what we call reversal of generation into restriction. On the other hand, if the flame demands energy at more than 4 times what the fuel can supply, the fuel is consumed almost instantly, and the supply system collapses. This is known as excessive drain as restriction. In both cases, collapse is not caused by opposition, but by imbalance. Finally, let's summarize the core values of this quantitative system. R equals 1.0, structure equilibrium point. R equals 0.5, 2.0, stable window boundaries. R equals 0.25, 4.0, reversal and collapse thresholds. Please remember these two numbers, 0.25 and 4.0. This is summary table, so feel free to pause the video if you want to take a closer look. In the chapters that follow, when we analyze why power spirals out of control in some countries and why capital ends up capturing politics, you will see that every social tragedy ultimately comes down to the same thing, a force inside the system crossing one of these two red lines. That's it for today's video. When these concepts are foundational, They are the underlying code you will need to understand our upcoming deductions of social structures. Once you master these dynamics, the later chapters will be much easier to grasp. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.